friends. Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. Today, I had a feeling it was going to be a busy one, and sure enough, it is. It's the day after the federal budget, and a little twist yesterday. A Conservative member of Parliament crossed the floor over to the Liberal Party. I got so many DMs about that. I can't even tell you how many people, as soon as that dropped, reached out to me and asked me to explain what that means. So I'll tell you what, we're going to talk about floor crossing at some point in this episode. And I don't know how long it's going to go. I'm going to give you the facts on the budget. I'm going to give you a little bit of commentary, but I want you to remember, I want to specify this every opportunity I get. I'm a conservative, and you're going to hear my thoughts on this from a conservative lens. But more so than a conservative, you're going to hear my thoughts from a member of the middle class's lens. I'm going to talk about what this budget means for middle class Canadians who are just trying to get by. They just need a job. They want to be able to pay their bills, maybe take a vacation once a year with their family, and have the basics. They're law-abiding citizens, they're taxpayers, and they're the ones who have been really overlooked in the 10 years of Justin Trudeau. Did this budget meet the moment and do something for the middle class? We'll get to that. I'm also going to play for you some opposition reaction, but I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm sure you can imagine how Pierre Poilievre feels about this budget. He said his condition was, don't make life more expensive for the middle class. Don't do something that is going to drive up inflation, which costs the middle class money, and then that creates a higher interest rate scenario, which also costs the middle class money. Pierre Poilievre's condition to support the budget was very simple. Don't make life more expensive for the middle class. This budget failed miserably. There's really nothing in it for the middle class, so I'm sure you can imagine what Pierre Poilievre has to say. I'm not going to play him in this episode. What I am going to do is play for you the opposition parties, the ones who the Liberals are hoping will support this budget and get it passed. And it's now down to 2 votes that the Liberals need to pass this budget. In fact, if they get 2 more votes, they've technically got a majority government. And they can do whatever they want with a majority government. That's coming up in this episode. Before I get to the highlights from the budget, though, I just want to again thank Colin DeMello from Global News. He was my guest on the pod yesterday. We had a really great chat. If you didn't get a chance to hear that episode, go back and give it a listen. Colin is great, and I did get some really good feedback on that episode as well. So I am going to invite him to come back on the pod in the future, and we will talk provincial politics once again. So thanks again to Colin. It was great to have him. And now we jump into today's episode. I want to start off with a little trip down memory lane, a little trip back to 2014. Do you remember this?
So in this economic climate, how committed to a balanced budget would you be right now? Would it worry you to go into deficit in this current climate to, as you say, put more people to work?
The commitment needs to be a commitment to grow the economy, and the budget will balance itself.
That is liberal math. We need to invest, and the budget will balance itself. Spoiler alert, it didn't. We are in a pretty serious spot right now here in Canada. Top line numbers on the budget. Right after we hear a little bit of the announcement from François-Philippe Champagne. He is the finance minister.
This budget must be generational in its ambition and serve to shape our economy and our nation's future. To weather the storm of uncertainty, we will not lower ourselves, Mr. Speaker. Quite the opposite. We will raise them to catch the winds of economic change because we believe in Canada. We will build here at home stronger industries, nation-building infrastructures, and millions of more homes for Canadians. We will protect what matters most, our people, our communities, and our sovereignty. And we will empower Canadians by making life more affordable, creating new career opportunities, and ensuring every generation can get ahead. This is how we win. This is how we keep winning, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, that is the prelude to the actual announcement about the budget. I want to take a minute here and go through this because I want everyone to understand exactly what it is that the Liberals want to do. Number one, the budget is being called the Building Canada Strong budget. This one is supposed to be full of generational investment to rebuild the economy and protect our sovereignty and empower Canadians. They want to build, they want to protect, and they want to empower. My question is, for who? Because there's nothing in this budget for the middle class. Absolutely nothing in here that is going to make your life more affordable right now. Nothing. And that's not in dispute. You can watch the CBC, you can watch CTV, you can watch any of those talking heads, and everybody seems to agree. This budget doesn't do anything to address the crisis that is happening in the middle class right now. Let's get to some of the numbers. They say they want to aim the day-to-day operating spending with revenues, but not until the 2028-2029 budget. These are the expenses. So in other words, we're still spending more than we're bringing in there. They want to maintain a declining deficit to GDP ratio while boosting capital investment. Does that make sense to anybody? Anybody? I'm sure some economists listening right now could probably figure out a way to spin that, but do we seem like we're in a situation right now where we could have a declining deficit to GDP ratio? Because I don't see it. They want to introduce capital budgeting framework and separate long-term investments from routine operations. And I've talked about that in the past. It's not necessarily a bad idea. It's good to have all kinds of information about how our country is performing economically. But it doesn't change the fact that there's still one budget and there's one bottom line. The bottom line on this one is very high. Roughly $280 billion in spending over 5 years. That's on infrastructure, housing, defense, and industry. A projected deficit of $78.3 billion this year. $78.3 billion is our new deficit. When it comes to housing, there's the Build Canada Homes program. They say that'll accelerate housing construction. We've been hearing about this for a number of years, going back to Justin Trudeau. I believe it was in 2017 that he started talking about accelerating home construction. Look around. Has any of that been done? Any of it? They talk about large infrastructure funds for housing, transportation, and urban projects. This is the one that's going to make your local mayor freak out and love it and cheer on Mark Carney and the Liberals. They need money for transportation and urban projects, and they will take it from whoever will give it to them, and they will support this budget. Your local mayor. Please remember, by the way, if you've got a mayor that supports this, that is in support of Canada with an almost $80 billion deficit, $280 billion in new investment. Please remember my philosophy. Next fall, we fire them all. When it comes to defense and security, they say there's going to be major investments to modernize the Canadian Armed Forces and strengthen our defense capabilities. I don't have a problem with that. I've never understood why Canada committed to 2% of GDP for our NATO commitment, but never actually did it. I don't understand that. So now that's going to get corrected. We're going to be spending tons and tons and tons of money on the military. We probably should have been all along, but this is the situation we find ourselves in. We're behind the 8 ball. We've also got some very old equipment that needs to be replaced. In fact, some of this equipment is costing us a fortune just to maintain it while we're waiting for replacements. And we don't really have any other options. We've got to keep using this old, outdated stuff. There's also going to be an emphasis on domestic military production and strategic independence from foreign supply chains. In other words, they're going to spend a ton of money to buy from suppliers other than America. Does that make sense to you? Or should we give our military the most advanced, most modern, most capable military products available? I mean, we've talked about the F-35 fighter jet many times. This is something that Stephen Harper committed to buying, and then Justin Trudeau came in and canceled it. Then Justin Trudeau had to re-invoke that purchase, but at a much higher price. And now Mark Carney is thinking, we don't really want to deal with the Americans, I guess, so we won't buy the F-35. We'll buy something from somebody else. I mean, we can, but that means we're not in sync with the Americans when it comes to the defense of North America. And it also means that we're not buying the best jet out there. That's a decision that the government has got to make. When it comes to taxes, the government yesterday in the budget pointed to the elimination of the consumer carbon tax. That happened back in April. We already got the benefit of that, and I think the benefit has already been eaten away by gas companies that are raising the price at the pump, even though they're paying less now than they were. So that's not going to help anybody right now. There's going to be targeted tax credits to support productivity, investment, and worker training. In other words, those tax credits are not for you. They're not for your family. It's not like you're now going to get a credit where you can put your kid in hockey or in lacrosse or baseball and write that off. That was something that Justin Trudeau canceled that Stephen Harper had put in place. That's not coming back. None of those little tax credits are happening. All of the tax credits are for businesses. That's not going to help the middle class. Maybe some small businesses, but not even all. In fact, I'm led to believe the Federation of Independent Business really does not like this budget at all, because even they say there's nothing in it for small business. They say there's going to be continued GST, HST rebates and affordability measures, but I'm not even clear what those are. When it comes to technology and innovation, new funding for AI and quantum technologies and digital infrastructure. Everything I know about AI is that private businesses are spending a lot because they're going to make a lot. Is the government going to make a lot off of AI, or are we just going to give corporations billions of dollars so that they have a competitive advantage, I guess? And how will that filter back through the tax system and benefit the people? That one I don't understand. There's going to be a research and development tax incentive and innovation grants for businesses. I always wonder about those grants that they hand out, because it seems like they go to businesses that are friendly with the government in power, not necessarily the businesses who deserve them. They say there's also going to be an emphasis on improving Canada's productivity gap versus other G7 countries. Well, we do need to improve that because the other G7 countries are far ahead of us. When it comes to the public service, there's going to be a slowdown in federal hiring. A reallocation of spending is going to happen there. So, in other words, the money that we're going to save from getting rid of, I believe it was 28,000 in the short term, 18,000, tens of thousands of civil servants are going to lose their job. They're going to be done. And then apparently we're going to use some of that money for capital investments. But it's still not clear what those capital investments are. And any of the so-called nation building projects, we won't even find out what they are until the Grey Cup. There's also going to be a base funding freeze or 2% cut for some departments in the federal civil service, including Indigenous services. Bold move to cut Indigenous funding right now. When it comes to immigration, a $1.7 billion international talent attraction strategy to draw skilled workers. They're ready to open up the doors again. Forget the skilled workers that we have here that can't find a job. They're going to spend $1.7 billion to bring in skilled immigrants. Man, that's a tough one for a lot of Canadians to swallow. I think that's going to be a real issue for a lot of people. They say there's going to be adjustments to the immigration and temporary resident targets to meet labor shortages. Again, we don't have a labor shortage. We've got more people unemployed now than we have in a long, long time. I don't know why we would bring a single person here when we don't have a house for them and there's Canadians looking for jobs. They say they're also going to focus on training Canadians for in-demand sectors, whatever that means. Is this another skills and development fund, a scandal in the making? We'll find out. When it comes to, I could just keep going, but there's nothing in this for the middle class. There's nothing in this for people like you and I that are worried about their job and struggling to make ends meet. There's nothing in here for people that are check to check. And I can't believe that. I am just gobsmacked by that that this government is so out of touch that they thought the Canadian people are good. We've got to create a whole bunch of slush funds and create a whole bunch of bureaucracy and make sure that all of our friends and liberal insiders get rich, because that's what I think is going to happen. And the reason I think that is because it has been happening for 10 years. And there's no reason to think that the next 2, 3, 4, however long we're stuck with Carney are going to be any different. You know what? On second thought, let me give you just a few more raw numbers. Housing. They're going to spend $130 billion to build these mobile home trailer parks. Private research and development, $210 billion. Infrastructure, $315 billion over 5 years. Industrial development programs, $270 billion. Accelerated depreciation and immediate expensing measures, $60 billion. And I don't even know what that means. When it comes to the Build Communities Strong Fund, $51 billion over 10 years, starting next fiscal year, ongoing annual funding of $3 billion for provinces and territories and municipal infrastructure. There's so much overlap in infrastructure that I'm wondering who's getting rich off of this. Who is getting rich? Our debt is going up to $1.7 trillion by 2029. Think about that. $1.7 trillion. And we have an almost $80 billion deficit. Let me put it to you this way. Everyone understands that when you take out a loan, which is essentially what we're doing, we're spending money that we don't have. We're borrowing it by selling off bonds. We have to repay that money at some point. Well, there's interest on a loan. If you have a $500,000 mortgage, a good amount of how much you pay every single month goes to interest. And the Canadian government is no different. We're going to be spending, I believe it's $70 billion a year to service our debt. Just stop and think about that for 1 second. $70 billion a year. We are currently spending $53 billion a year. It's going up to $70 billion tax dollars every year just to pay off the interest. That's before we pay down a single thing. And it seems like there's no interest in paying down this debt. None. I've heard a few people float the idea that the only way the government can bring in that kind of money to pay off $70 billion a year in interest is to hike the GST or the HST a lot. It would have to go from 13 to 15% was the most reasonable, modest calculation that I've seen. Is Mark Carney, if he gets a majority, and he might, thanks to the floor crossers, is he going to have to hike the HST to 15%? I can totally see it coming. I don't think he's going to hike income taxes, but I could totally see him raising the HST, and he's going to say, we have to do this. I don't know what to tell Canadians. Nothing yesterday made life more affordable, and everything proposed is going to raise the cost of living. It's going to raise the cost of living. Things are going to get worse because of yesterday's federal budget. Let me play it to you in different terms. This is just me talking right now and giving you some of my opinion on it, but let's hear from the leaders of the opposition. Let's start off with the Green Party leader, Elizabeth May.
And we identified, as we read it, this budget is not about even sacrifices across our country. They're generational sacrifices. My grandchildren lose. This government has decided not even to mention our legally binding Paris targets and has jettisoned most climate programs, including the oil and gas cap. The climate competitiveness strategy, so-called, will create large winners in the corporate sector and create more subsidies for fossil fuels. We cut assistance to the poorest of the poor in the developing world. We do have some good things which we identify in our press release, but let me turn it over to Mike for his comments.
Not going to play Mike. Don't need to hear from him. That's what Elizabeth May has to say on behalf of the Green Party. And again, in case you missed that, even her grandkids are going to be making sacrifices because of what came out of Ottawa yesterday. What about the Bloc Québécois? Here's Yves-François Blanchet.
Like you're leaning toward voting no on this budget. Can you explain why?
You are
you have a very good perspective on things. Where did you get that? I hardly see how, after having met with our caucus tonight, we could vote in favor of this budget. Those $78 billion of deficit, whatever tricks they want to invent. There's nothing of what we did ask in the budget. And I must tell you that what the Bloc Québécois asked in order to maybe support the budget about elders, about healthcare transfers, about what we did ask, but one thing that was not given to Quebecers and given to everybody else would have been good for all Canadians, not only Quebecers. Still, the answer is no. This is a red conservative budget, which Mr. Harper might have signed. And there's nothing for Quebecers in there, absolutely nothing. We did ask what was basically the object of a large consensus within the population of Quebec. And the answer from a Quebecer, Mr. Champagne, is blunt, no.
Okay. The Bloc Québécois says there's nothing in that for Quebec either. What do the New Democrats say? They don't have a full-time leader at the moment, so they've got Don Davies there acting as the interim leader in Parliament. What's Don going to tell his 7 members to do?
Well, today we have the first budget at the federal level in 18 months, and I want to contextualize it a little bit. Canadians are facing serious economic pressures from coast to coast to coast. We have skyrocketing prices in groceries and rent, and housing as an ownership proposition is simply out of the question for too many people. We have unemployment at 10-year highs, particularly hard for young people, where 1 in 6 young people is out of work, and many more than that are underemployed. Economic growth is weak, and of course we face serious problems from south of the border.
So that's the intro. He knows how bad things are. Is he going to do anything about it? Will he use his members to bring down the Liberal government and not allow this budget to pass?
So it is in that context that we're evaluating this budget today. I can tell you that New Democrats are going to take the time to study this budget. We're going to consult with stakeholders. We're going to talk to Canadians, particularly working Canadians, and review this budget to see if this budget passes our lens of whether it works for working Canadians. So I'll happy to take any questions you may have.
Kind of cowardly, isn't it? But that's par for the course with the NDP. Jagmeet Singh knew that what Justin Trudeau was doing was screwing this country, in particular the middle class. And Jagmeet Singh did it anyway so that he could get his pension. Here's the New Democrats again. They just pointed out all of the things that are wrong here in Canada and how badly people are suffering. And it was not an emphatic, we won't support this budget. The NDP are a joke. They should probably just pack it in and we should just become a two-party system in Canada, because that tries to create the illusion that there's opposition. But when you vote with the government and you don't challenge them on anything, you're just part of the government. And that's really what the NDP have been for a very long time now. Completely irrelevant, only there to create the illusion that there's some opposition, but there's really not. They're just a wing of the Liberal Party, and they're the far left wing, if I'm being honest. You know what? Let me hear the end of the budget. François-Philippe Champagne, yesterday in the House of Commons, he stood up and he gave the budget highlights, his talking points. In fairness to the government, let's hear the wrap up here and how François sees things going.
This is how we give Canadians the tool they need to shape the future. This is how we build Canada strong. It all comes down to a choice between two visions. One vision of resignation, a vision that would scale back the vital support Canadians rely on, make it harder for families to find a home, and leave our country more vulnerable, poorer, and dependent. And another vision, one rooted in confidence confidence in Canadian, and in the belief that by making generational investments today, we can build lasting prosperity for tomorrow. By putting more money in people's pocket, by ensuring every Canadian can retire with dignity, by making the dream of homeownership a reality once again, by building the infrastructure our city needs to grow, by keeping our community safe for our children and our parents. That is the path we choose, Mr. Speaker. That is the path of Budget 2025.
Yes.
It's just so detached from reality, though. I mean, he can say whatever he wants, but I think any reasonable person listening to this podcast knows what's really going on. He took a shot at the Conservatives, said that's not the right way to go. What Pierre Poilievre wants to do is the wrong direction. He said, we're going to support Canadians and support Canadian businesses and blah, blah. You just heard it. Nothing in this budget helps people. Nothing. Nothing in there is new. The only things they can point to for affordability measures are things that have already happened or that they already announced. There's nothing in that budget for the Canadian people. Before I talk about floor crossers, now that we've covered the budget and the top line numbers, you've heard from all of the stakeholders except for Pierre Poilievre. Let's talk about what happens next. Just yesterday or the day before, that son of a bitch, Tiff Macklem, governor of the Bank of Canada, sat down and did an interview at the Logic Summit in Toronto. Tiff actually did have a few thoughts on the economy. Listen to this.
What worries me the most is that, you just showed some polling of Canadians. Canadians are clearly worried about the cost of living. We did have a big increase in inflation. We've got inflation back down, but the price level is higher. People don't pay inflation, they pay prices. They're still feeling the impact of that going forward. They're still feeling the impact of that past inflation. It hasn't gone away. It's got a long tail. So what can we do about that problem? Well, our mandate is to keep inflation close to 2%. We're not going to push the overall price level back down. And in fact, if we tried to do that, it would be very bad in our economy. That's what causes Great Depressions. That's why we target inflation. So the question is, okay, so what's going to make it better? Well, the only thing that's going to make it better is to grow our income. If there's more income, things become more affordable, but that is going to take some hard decisions. That is going to take some time, and it gets to this polling. Canadians are it looks like they're ready for some hard decisions, but it's going to take some perseverance.
Tiff with a very bleak outlook. In fact, I'm shocked he actually used the word depression. That's going to come back and haunt him. I know that some eagle-eye reporter spotted that, clipped that clip, and is going to pull that out in the future. Tiff Macklem talking about what it would take for the Bank of Canada to cause a depression. But of course, right now we're talking about the federal government. They don't seem to understand what apparently Tiff does. He looked at the polling and he said Canadians are very, very, very worried about their finances. They're worried about the future. They're worried about their jobs. There's nothing directly for the middle class in that budget. Nothing whatsoever. What about the supports for businesses and all these other slush funds that the Liberals have created that they, by the way, will administer? And they will decide who can access it. And the winners will be picked by the government. Will any of that help the middle class? Because the budget is going to give money to softwood lumber producers and the big conglomerates that own steel and aluminum companies, does that mean your job is more safe? Do you think it's more safe? Do you think you'll see even a penny of that? Or are we just giving CEOs and boards of directors and investors a massive handout that will not trickle down to the average worker? Because that's the way it feels to me. And I don't think I'm alone there. I think everybody understands what's going on here. This was a budget for corporate Canada and only select industries. This is a budget that sets aside a whole ton of money that they can dip into whatever they want but it doesn't actually go to the people. So what is in it for the people? In all likelihood, probably a substantial tax increase. We're going to have to raise taxes. They have to go up. We're going to be paying a ton of money every year, billions and billions and billions, just to service our debt. And they're piling more debt on. We have a $78 billion deficit. What are we going to do here? I think there's a lot of folks out there that were really, really hoping that we could, as the rumors suggested, possibly have a winter election, a do-over from the spring election. Mark Carney has had months to put his money where his mouth is and to do what he said he was going to do. And so far, it's been an abject failure. Tariffs are worse than they were. We're not even negotiating with the Americans anymore. Donald Trump is right pissed off at Doug Ford and a few others in the Canadian government, and he might not even participate in CUSMA renegotiations. I don't know. Like, we're about to get shafted. We were either with them or against them. Only two countries retaliated against the Americans, China and Canada. We're not in his good books. We could have been. We could have worked on a great deal that would have worked for them and us. But those negotiations have stalled because we wanted to pound our chests and we wanted to fight. And that got us absolutely nowhere as we sit right now. So there was a lot of people that were hoping we might have an election. Enough people have seen enough from Mark Carney, and they're hoping we're going to have an opportunity to vote. And in this current minority parliament, the Liberals only needed 3 votes from the opposition. They either needed 3 votes or they needed a couple of people to sit out and abstain, not vote at all, not show up for work. And then they would have been able to pass this budget. But now it's not even a matter of getting enough votes to pass the budget. They may be into majority territory. Yesterday, in a pretty shocking betrayal, a Conservative member of Parliament from Nova Scotia crossed the floor to join the Liberals. Chris D'Entremont, I think is his name. I don't know. He seems like a loser, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know how this guy got elected in the first place, other than the folks on the East Coast are weird, man. They really are, especially when it comes to politics and who they choose to lead. Nova Scotia is who elected Sean Fraser, the Justice Minister. Sean Fraser, the same guy who has now announced the government will not use the notwithstanding clause to overrule the Supreme Court, who said that mandatory minimum sentences for possessing child pornography are unconstitutional. Sean could have used the notwithstanding clause and said, notwithstanding that ruling, we are going to have mandatory minimums. He's not going to do it. You're not going to get it. There will be no mandatory minimum sentences for possession of child pornography. That's the Liberal government. Nova Scotia elected that guy, and now another guy they elected, the only Conservative on the island, now he's crossing to the Liberals. Here is Chris just a few months ago in Parliament.
Canadians are hurting. Families are being forced to cut deeply into their grocery budgets just to get by. And frankly, that makes me a little bit angry and a little bit sad. In Southwest Nova Scotia, where I have lived my entire life, people work hard. They want to own a home, feed their children, provide a good education to them, and maybe take a vacation every once in a while. But you know what? Since 2015, everything changed. Since I was first elected here in 2019, the cost of living has skyrocketed. Even then, families in West Nova, it was called at the time, but in Acadianapolis, were struggling. We warned that Liberals, their out-of-control spending and massive deficits were irresponsible. But of course, they didn't listen. And now, after 6 months under a new Prime Minister who promised financial discipline, Canadians are still waiting.
That's just a little bit of what this prick a couple of months ago said in the House of Commons. And now what does he want to do? He wants to go and sit with the Liberals. He wants to go and vote with Mark Carney, the guy who you just heard him criticizing, and he was right. Families are struggling. Nobody can get ahead. Broken promises. No progress on making a deal with America. All of that was true when he said it. But now, for some reason, he's decided, now, you know what? Mark Carney is the guy for the job. Now, did he really have some sort of an epiphany? Did he look at that $78 billion deficit and say, I need me some of that? That's what my constituents are going to like. I don't think so. So clearly something went on behind the scenes. There's a suggestion here put forward by former Speaker of the House, Andrew Scheer, and now the Conservative House Leader. Yesterday, he was on CTV News Channel, and he talked about Chris D'Entremont crossing the floor. He's got an interesting theory about why that might have happened. Listen to this.
Well, it's disappointing that Chris D'Entremont has decided that he doesn't want to fight for a more affordable life for Canadians, that he doesn't want to fight inflationary deficits that are driving up grocery prices in his riding. You know, he's now telling constituents that he just got their votes just a few months ago, that now he's in favor of the industrial carbon tax on things like farm equipment and fertilizer, driving up food costs, that he's in favor of fuel standards that the Liberals are imposing that's going to increase gasoline by 17 cents a litre. So, you know, he'll have to go back to the supporters in his riding that dug deep into their own pockets to support his campaign and explain why he took their precious time and resources and then turned their back on them just a few months later.
Might it be that he doesn't think your party's solutions are the correct ones now?
Well, you know, he ran on them in the platform. He saw our platform and he said, yes, I support all this, back in April when Conservatives were offering hope to young Canadians who couldn't find jobs, who had to move back in with their parents, back into their parents' basement. Our platform offered hope for young Canadians. Mark Carney's message is one of sacrifice, that Canadians who have been hammered hard by the cost of living crisis are going to have to sacrifice even more to feed a ever-growing budget, a deficit that's going to add billions to the national debt that has to be paid off with interest. So Mr. D'Entremont's going to have to explain that to his constituents.
And I hope
just a little bit from Andrew Scheer. There's a suggestion here that Chris was angry because he wanted to be the Deputy Speaker of the House, and the Conservatives didn't back him for that role. So he said, fine, screw you. I'll go over to the Liberals then. When you think about democracy and how our system works, people at the local level vote for someone to go to Ottawa and represent them and their interests. And more people in that particular riding of Nova Scotia in the last election, just 6, 7, 8 months ago, voted for the Conservative candidate because they wanted Pierre Poilievre's plan for Canada. And Chris said, thank you for your vote. Thank you for your donations. Thank you for putting a sign on your lawn. I'm going to go to Ottawa and fight for those things. But when he personally didn't get a little payoff, he said, fine, I'm going to go to the other party. That's a betrayal. That's a betrayal. There's nothing really in our system, though, to prevent that from happening. People are allowed to quit a party, to cross the floor and join another party, and there's no real conditions or stipulations for doing it. In this case, I think Chris is completely dishonest. I think Chris has betrayed his voters. I think Chris should pay a heavy, heavy price when we do eventually vote again. And I hope those constituents, they don't just vote him out. I want to see them really, really vote him out. It shouldn't even be close because of what he did. Are there no principles in politics anymore? I mean, if you listen to me daily, you know what I stand for. You know who I care about. You know what my values are and what my principled stance on an issue is going to be. When politicians can in 1 month say, I believe in all this stuff, and then a few months later, for their own personal gain, say, I've changed my mind on all of it and I've got a completely different political ideology now. Don't you think there should need to be a by-election? Don't you think that before they cross the floor, they should have to resign their seat and request a by-election and then they run for the other party? Don't you think? You know what? To be perfectly honest, Chris D'Entremont, I've never said this guy's name before today, by the way. Like I said earlier, he seems like a total loser. He should have to go back to his voters, back to his constituents and say, I've changed my mind. I've got a completely different ideology now. I want to run for a different party that's pretty unpopular, by the way, and I'd like you to vote for me. That's how our system should work, but it doesn't work that way. And you know what? There's nothing to stop parties from bribing either. I'm a little surprised that a Conservative crossed to the Liberals because it is a completely opposite view of how this country should be run and where we should be going and who should be the priority. Liberals, they prioritize the people that support them. They prioritize big business that donates a lot to them. They probably have a lot of financial interest in a lot of the companies that are going to get a lot of this support. I mean, you all understand how it works. The Conservatives have a completely different philosophy. Empower the middle class. Shore up our small business. Then you'll see the economy start to cook again. When the middle class has money in their pockets and they can go out and inject it into the economy, then you'll really start to see our economy cook again. It's a very, very different philosophy between liberals and conservatives. I don't understand how one guy can completely flip around his ideology on a dime like that, unless they're personally benefiting. If anybody was going to cross the floor, I would have thought liberals would have crossed to the conservatives. But they're not doing that. Some of them, don't believe the BS that comes out of their prime minister and their finance minister and most of their cabinet ministers. There are some really good liberal members of parliament, truly good people that I think do care. But they want to be in government. They want the power. They want the prestige. And if anybody even leaks that they might be considering crossing the floor, that's when all the bribes come out. Just so you know. If you do that, then this might happen. Oh, if you go to the conservatives, well, then this isn't going to happen. And we kind of had an appointment for you to sit on this board or whatever after you're done in politics. I mean, there's lots of ways that they can keep people hooked. Sometimes it's as simple as offer a cabinet position, and that's good enough to keep somebody. Sometimes it's got to be more. And usually it's to benefit that politician personally. Where's the integrity? I'm also led to believe that there's going to be at least 2 more conservatives that are going to cross to the liberals. I'd like to know what bought them off. I'd like to know what the payoff is for them personally, because you can't tell me that you completely changed your political ideology. You were either lying in the last election or you're lying now. One or the other. Either way, the voters should get a choice here. In that Nova Scotia riding that Chris is from, they voted for a conservative member of parliament. They voted for Pierre Poilievre's vision for Canada, not Mark Carney's. But now they've got a member of parliament who's going to support Mark Carney's vision and not support Pierre Poilievre's. How is that fair to voters? Once again, the middle class gets shafted. And if those 2 Quebec MPs do cross the floor to the Liberals, that gives them a majority government. Well, that in itself is a problem because the Canadian electorate in that election, not that long ago, back in the spring, decided to only give Mark Carney and the Liberals a minority government so that they have to be accountable to the opposition parties. I don't know if anybody back in April would have been comfortable giving Mark Carney a blank check and a 4-year majority mandate that the opposition can't stop. A minority situation is good for a lot of different reasons, namely that the government could fall if it doesn't reflect the will of Parliament. But what happens when parliamentarians are not reflecting the will of their local constituents? Our whole democracy is a mess right now. Crossing the floor is dishonest. If you want to cross the floor, you should resign your seat. You should come back to your voters and ask for their vote. Tell them why you want to make the change and ask them to support you by voting for you. None of these people did that. If those 2 Quebec MPs cross, plus Chris crossed yesterday. Chris Cross. That gives Mark Carney a majority, and that's not what the Canadian people gave Mark Carney. What did they get bought off with? What was the incentive for them to do it? I'd really like to know. Friends, I would love to remain optimistic. I think if you've been listening to me for the last almost year now, you'll know that I try to be optimistic. Even when it comes to the negotiations with the Americans, I truly believe a good deal will get done or could get done. But I'm not optimistic about what happened yesterday. That budget, in my estimation, this is just my personal opinion, is the wrong direction for Canada. And we are saddling future generations with generational debt. That's why they call it that. It's generational debt. What the Liberals say is generational investment is also generational debt. And what are we going to have to show for it? Think 5 years down the line, 2030. When we look back on this budget from 2025, which is likely going to pass, now it's likely going to pass. When we look back with 5 years of hindsight, how much do you think will have been built? Do you think we'll even be a country? Because it seems like we're on the road to bankruptcy in a hurry. We are speeding towards it. How much tax money will have been wasted? How much money will we be paying in taxes? Because frankly, taxes have to go up. Like, everybody's got to get ready for that. Taxes are going to go up. They have to. Mark Carney is not stupid. He was a banker. He's a CEO. He's an executive. He understands dollars and cents. He doesn't care about you and your dollars and cents, but overall, he does count them, and he knows the amount of interest that we have to pay on our debt. Growing debt, by the way, because we have a $78 billion deficit. It's not sustainable. Taxes are going to have to go up if this budget passes. And even though the Canadian people only gave Mark Carney a minority government through floor crossing, which probably had some nefarious circumstances behind it, he could end up with a majority. And that's not right. It's not right. I'll have more to say about this tomorrow, and tomorrow I will also have Pierre Poilievre on. We need to hear from the leader of the opposition here. The country is evenly divided. Half that want to support Mark Carney, half that want to support Pierre Poilievre. And to be honest with you, I'm not even 100% sure that the half that support Mark Carney actually support Mark Carney. A lot of them just don't like Pierre Poilievre. That's the reality. But his policy is one that I think would probably solve a lot of our problems. If we don't have an election now, Mark Carney will almost certainly, through floor crossing and backroom deals, end up with essentially a majority. Then we're really screwed. You watch. Remember this episode, November the 5th, 2025. If Mark Carney, through floor crossing and backroom deals, ends up with a majority, Canada's in real bad shape. Nothing good is coming here. Nothing good is coming. It's all bad news. And that's coming from The Optimist. I really hope something happens. I really hope some liberals come to their senses and choose the better way. You don't have to blindly follow along with your party saying that this is the way forward when you know in your heart of hearts this is not the way forward. This is catastrophic. This is going to bankrupt our country and bankrupt future generations. A declining debt to GDP ratio isn't realistic. Why would you say that as a talking point? It's not real and it won't happen. We're in rough shape. Liberals, now's the time for you to do the right thing. Your government is corrupt as the day is long. If you're not part of that corruption, you should cross the floor. You should be coming to the conservative side, where we want to empower the middle class, where we want to support small businesses, not hand out billions of dollars in corporate welfare to businesses that are profitable and make billions of dollars. Money that will never filter down to the workers, that'll always stay with the shareholders and CEOs. Now's your chance to do the right thing. You should be crossing the floor to the opposition. You want to talk about courage? That would be courage. To stand up and do the right thing. All right, friends, that's my time for today. I got to go. Tomorrow, brand new episode. Like I said, Pierre Poilievre. I'll have his audio tomorrow and whatever else comes out of today. I believe the Prime Minister is speaking and a whole bunch more. Maybe we'll have a little more clarity by then. Until then, I leave you with Pat James and The Whole Truth. Hey now, see you tomorrow.